This is Hyperion. This is the one that the teachers tried to warn you about. Hyperion roars across the roof of the tower.
Meet your doom. Kalamazoo, I defeated you once. Cursed you to hold this college for eternity. You dare stand before me again.
Yes, Hyperion, again. But this time will be different. It is not I who unites the rooms, but my student. An unfitting title. They've surpassed even my skills. And I'd wager even yours.
Then you, fearless or foolish enough to unite the rooms, will face me.
Forgive me. I used you. It's all true. I was young and craved the power. A wish granted. Who would not want that? Like you, I found myself here, standing before Hyperion. Sighing, Kalamazoo turned away before speaking. I failed. Cursed. All those years of walking the halls of the college have left me desperate for revenge. That one perfect moment where I watch you fall, defeated. You're different. Better than I could ever hope of being. I told you all I know, but you have something else that I didn't. You can do this. With a voice like thunder from the heavens, Hyperion speaks.
Begin.
Hyperion is the epitome of what it truly means to live up to the title of the final boss. To see a character only hinted at previous dialogue suddenly show up at the end of the game is a risky move. If they don't end up leaving much of an impression after all that setup and fanfare, they can come off as a shallow attempt to pull a cliche twist. True, this quote-unquote twist isn't entirely original, and the hints weren't all that subtle. But why I love this regardless is because in his brief screen time, Hyperion absolutely establishes himself as the most intimidating force in the game, and one of the most intimidating enemies I have seen in any game I have ever played, at least not counting games that have an aspect of horror to them. It really goes to show just how far a simple bit of good writing, art direction, and sound design goes. Hyperion only gets a 49-second cutscene, 3 images, and barely a page with the dialogue to establish himself as the most intimidating force in the world of Doodle Hex before your battle begins. And he does it spectacularly. As a kid, even though it was never mentioned to be the case, I was always under the impression that Hyperion was supposed to be the god of the world of Doodle Hex even. And with good reason. Not only does his gigantic form tower over both you and Kalamazoo, but the world around him seems to bend to his will. The world below trembled as he erected his arena from the earth into the heavens until it rose higher than the atmosphere of the earth itself into space. He arrives like a meteor crashing into earth, and his booming voice is described as being like thunder from the heavens. Despite this immense show of strength though, Hyperion is not shown to be a meathead by any means. His folded arms, mysterious looking mask, and gold-plated armor, combined with his implied traditional attitude with his formal approach to the duel and disdain for Kalamazoo's irresponsible attempt to earn his wish from him, gives quite the sophisticated impression. I think a detail that may not have been intentional but is still one of my favourite things about Hyperion's design here are his hands. Adorned with gigantic glowing rubies, they further imply both his sophistication and mastery of the arcane, but being gigantic blood-red orbs on his fists, they also look a lot like enormous boxing gloves. Every aspect of Hyperion's designs just perfectly combines the ideas of being both intelligent and sophisticated, while also being incredibly, terrifyingly strong. Just everything about his design is like the concept of a godlike authority giving physical form. That's not even to mention the impeccable attack animations you'll see once you start the battle, that spectacularly show both Hyperion's immense destructive power and just how effortless it is for him to obliterate you in the fight. You also wouldn't be the first person that Hyperion has slaughtered in the story in carrying out his eternal servitude to the One Wish rune. He's not only the one who reduced Kalamazoo's body to dust, cursing him to haunt the college as a ghost for the rest of time, but he's also the one who murdered Caleb's father. Both of them were revered and powerful doodlers, and both of them still fell by his hand. Of course, all this hype is great, but in any other game, all this fanfare just could never be delivered on. How could you? If you haven't picked up yet though, Doodle Hex is not any other game. It's something special, and so it does its final boss justice. It only makes sense for the final fight in the game to be the most difficult. It's obvious. But even with that obvious fact stated, Hyperion is the single most enormous difficulty spike in the game by far. Maybe even one of the biggest difficulty spikes in any game I have ever played. Quite simply, the powers Hyperion has access to are basically cheating, and next to nothing in the game can counter him. His runes are just simply larger than every other character in the games, dealing enormous damage and breaking shields faster, to the point that even his small green runes break more than half of your shield in one hit. I found that out the hard way by trying to turn him into a frog as Princess Tiffany, and finding out that since his runes were so enormous, even just spamming small green runes at me was actually deadly. He also has access to the largest green rune in the game and has no trouble connecting it to take enormous chunks off your health bar. He not only can transform his shield into a glass shield that sends runes back that it blocks to come back and hit you with your own runes, but he can also at any time just decide, you know what, I don't like this situation, and trade just a little health to reverse the direction of all runes on the screen, sending your own runes back at yourself, although also sending his own runes back at himself as well. Even if you thought you were safe by simply sticking to pure damage runes, Hyperion also has access to the strongest barrier blessing in the game, which can tank entire red runes without even needing to shield for them. And casting red runes powers up his perfect curses, which deal more damage for each red rune on the screen, and when that curse is big enough, I've seen it take off more than half of my entire health bar in one hit. A single mistake against Hyperion is a death sentence. Given the time and mana, Hyperion has multiple solutions to every possible rune you could throw at him. There's only two ways you win this fight, and neither will be anywhere near easy. You either have to play defense immaculately, not making a single mistake for minutes on end of this, while sending a steady stream of unblockable damage at Hyperion to slowly win through a war of attrition. Or you do just the opposite. Try to pull some last second trickery to get past Hyperion's shield with a curse that will leave him vulnerable, or at least get him off your back for a moment, and then once you land that, go all in on closing out that game right there and right now, because the chances are from there you will never get another single opportunity that game to attack, at least not before you yourself are already dead. Out of those two options, the former is definitely preferable, because if you go for an all-out attack, he can simply decide to send it back on you and you will end up killing yourself with your own attack. But Hyperion's attacks are so enormous that only certain characters can really survive them. For most characters in the game, they do have to rely on the less reliable second option of simply going for an insanely greedy all-out attack and hoping you can sneak it under his nose to practically kill him in one combo. I don't think it's actually possible to get all his health done in one single combo, but it's definitely possible to get him down to very little from there, to the point that you might be able to kill him with just spamming red runes from there. After dozens and dozens of attempts, you might finally close out a single lucky win. Only to remember, these games are best of threes. You not only have to beat this impossibly difficult opponent that can basically cheat once, but twice in a row. True, you are allowed to drop one game against him if you haven't already lost one in that set, and then get your second win. But most of the time, if you lose one game against Hyperion in a set, it's already over. This means you can't just get a lucky run and call it a day. You have to be able to at least somewhat consistently defeat this near unkillable opponent who can counter anything you send at him and send attacks you could never dream of blocking without the super shield every couple seconds, each of which have the potential to take more than half of your entire health bar in one hit if handled poorly. Now, some could have found this frustrating, and I could sort of understand, but for me, this was perfect. A lot of the games in the DS library I grew up with, while fun, were typically very casual games, And while I may have only been 7, I spent a lot of time playing these games and trying to get good at them, so I really appreciated the highest skill ceiling Doodle Hex provided, especially because the few times I did come across something I found challenging, it was often down to clunky controls, like to go back to that Bomberman Land touch game again for a second. Fuck the rowing minigame. Moving on. Hyperion, though, I had no excuse for. The controls were fine, and the game gives me every tool at that character's disposal to be able to deal with him. And it's my job to develop the skill needed to overcome these overwhelming odds. When I first hit this enormous roadblock, I stopped playing Strat, which at that point was the only character I'd really been pushing to beat the game with so far. The only other character I'd played is that I quickly dabbled in Nadia, who was the first character I ever played, but other than that, I haven't really given many of them a good shot. But I stopped even trying to beat the game as Strat because I just felt I couldn't do it. As a result of that though, you know what I did? I started playing the other characters more, trying to get further with them. I learned other playstyles this way, and it was a lot more enjoyable to play all the other characters' stories, even if they were behind where I was on Strat in terms of progression, than it would have been if I'd already beaten the game by now and all this was trivial to me. Knowing that I hadn't beaten Hyperion yet with a single character, progressing with the other 9 characters became way more appealing, because now I actually wanted to know what runes they got to learn, and whether any of them would be more well equipped to beat Hyperion. Not to mention, this of course meant that by the time I came back to Hyperion, I had far more experience with the game under my belt. So, did any of those characters fare any better against Hyperion? Kinda? The problem still stands that Hyperion has a way to counter every attack in the game you could possibly throw at him regardless of which character you are. He is probably most vulnerable to steady streams of red runes overall, but even then that approach has its drawbacks by powering up his own curses. The steady streams of red runes tend to work because he has to either use his barrier or super shield to be able to block the damage from them, but if you're sending a steady stream of them instead of sending enormous bursts of them and then trying to enlarge them with an enlargement blessing or use some other kind of blessing, then all he's going to do is reverse it. Whereas if you're sending a steady stream of them, if he reverses them, he's only going to reverse a teeny bit. And as much as the reversal curse's downsides definitely don't outweigh its upsides 90% of the time, at the end of the day it is still a spell which hurts Hyperion to use and also sends his own attacks back on him. So he'll very rarely spend one of his reversals just to counter 2 red runes. All that being said, Hyperion is still a huge challenge for just about every character in the game. Even Rainbow, I'd say. Well, actually, there is one exception. I didn't know back then, but wow. Faye makes Hyperion an absolute joke. Petalfall easily obliterates every combo Hyperion could possibly throw at you, allowing you to really draw the game out, and by drawing the game out, you can slowly bleed Hyperion out of resources and health with that constant steady stream of unblockable damage, which Hyperion can only reverse minor portions of at a time. Other than that though, every other character in the game requires near absolute mastery with them to have a chance against Hyperion. I guess Rainbow, Djinn, and Caleb have a bit of an easier time than most of the rest of the cast, but all 3 are still no joke to challenge Hyperion with. And if you want to take him down as Gizmo, Cassie, or God forbid Princess Tiffany, then Jesus Christ, good luck with that. Wait, did you hear that? That alarm. That means... Sponsored segment. Okay, it's not a sponsored segment, but it is me plugging something which is more related to me. Quite a few of you will already know that I have a second channel completely dedicated to music production. I put out all of my music on Newgrounds so that it can be used in Geometry Dash levels if you want to, and I've been doing this for a while. In fact, Technocosm was initially supposed to be the main channel, it's just the gaming videos here on Double Chin Doge 7 obviously had a bit more of a general appeal, so this has kind of become the main channel over time. But even though my uploads aren't as frequent on Technocosm, they are especially high effort. Anyway, the reason to bring this up isn't to promote the second channel, I already bring that up at the end of every single video, but something related to it. You see, one or two of you might have noticed that I have a buddy called Snare. He's one of the moderators in our server, even though he doesn't talk much. And we've been friends for a while because he's been very supportive of my music. He really liked a lot of it, and he also produces a lot of electronic music, and he's also pretty good at it. And Snare is actually hoping to start up his own sample pack company called Tower of Babel, where he's going to be able to obviously sell off sample packs to help produce music. What you're hearing right now is a preview track for their second sample pack that they're going to release soon, TENEBROUS. But there's already one on their website which is available for free, which I actually helped make, called Tear Out. It's got over 160 free samples for Tear Out dubstep. So if any of you are even a little interested in music production, I'd obviously ask that you go over there and you support Snare's works. Haha, you get it? Because no one gets it. His YouTube channel's called Snare's Works. That's the joke. And oh yeah, before I end this segment, we actually made this Tear Out pack a while ago. The only reason I'm only bringing it up now is because we didn't have a website for it until now. So the preview track that we made for the Tear Out sample pack that we already made is already up on Newgrounds and can also be used in Geometry Dash levels if you like the sound of it. Anyway, thank you for listening, and we'll get back to the meat of the video right now. Hey, wait a minute, is that
Professor Carbuncle?
Oh, now that's badass! So yes, once you've managed to at least reach Hyperion, although not necessarily beat the game with a character, whichever teacher was the last teacher you fought with that character is now unlocked as a playable character. Call it a lazy reuse of assets if you want, but it will never not be cool as shit to me that you get to play as these overpowered boss characters that were kicking your ass beforehand, and now you can use every rune they did. I really like as well that in some cases certain characters are simply stronger when played as a computer. It's not very common, but it happens from time to time, and obviously I expected it to be true for the bosses. But honestly, for the most part, there are very few instances in which the computers have any advantage over you playing the same character as a human. In fact, I believe the only rune that the computer versions of the teachers can use that the actual versions when you play them can't is if you fight Professor Carbuncle last, he will also have the speed up blessing. However, that's a rune that he's not allowed to use in story mode, so when you play Professor Carbuncle, you won't get the speed blessing. But even that being said, the speed blessing will be one of the least powerful tools in his kit, if anything, so honestly I don't consider that much of a downside. Lopang and Miss Madrugada, though, are both exactly the same as far as I can tell. Professor Carbuncle is definitely the most, let's say fair to be nice, of the three teachers. Definitely not a bad character, but considering he's one of those teachers, you might have expected him to be a bit stronger. I'd actually say he's more just average, maybe a bit above average. He's absolutely fun to use, but at the end of the day, he's very curse dependent, and we've already kind of explained how as spicy and cool curses are, they are, at the end of the day, the most counterable form of attack you can pull. But at the very least, you get the highest defense possible in the game while not having to sacrifice your offense or your speed. This Madrugada is, she's stupid. I genuinely think the devs don't quite understand how overpowered they made her. And I have to admit, it's a little bit disappointing because the way that she is overpowered is kind of, boring. I already mentioned Ms. Madrugada is kind of like another master of red runes, like the Djinn. But unlike the Djinn, she really doesn't sacrifice anything to get that power in red runes. Whereas the Djinn ends up being a very, very slow character with very expensive runes to be able to be so powerful with red runes. Ms. Madrugada kinda gets to do everything, except be fast, but being fast doesn't matter that much when your attacks can't be blocked anyway. Although she doesn't really have much in the way of outright defense besides a small little barrier, she does have the lifesteal blessing, which is extremely powerful on its own, let alone on a character who has maxed out offense and the ability to easily spam enormous red runes that even if blocked will deal large amounts of damage. This means that Miss Madrugada is both extremely hard to kill, requires special runes or the super shield to not take damage from constantly, while also just being able to put out the largest damage in the game, probably out of any character out there at all. And all she really has to do is just cast some red runes, maybe enlarge them just before they hit the opponent. If she ever gets in danger of dying, just use that lifesteal. I think the craziest thing is the fact that they decided to give her the blessing which halves the cost of your next spell. That just seems crazy to me because already it's not even particularly in flavor for her to be able to do that. That's more of a fast characters kind of thing, which of course isn't her specialty. But then as well as that, as you can imagine, it's extremely powerful with her because she has the largest red rune in the game, and now she can cast it for half its cost when it's supposed to cost your entire mana reserve. So yeah, playing as Miss Madrugada is kind of just an enormous power trip. Although that being said, she doesn't make Hyperion a joke, although she is definitely one of the easiest characters in the game to beat Hyperion with. Hey, so you want to see how stupid overpowered Madrugada is? Here we go.
2, 1. Meet your doom.
And Hyperion's dead. Yeah, that was.
3, 2, 1. Meet your doom.
And then finally there's Lapang, who's my personal favourite. I feel like he strikes the best balance between being stronger than the other characters without making the game feel very trivial and kind of dumbed down like Miss Madrugada sometimes does. Once again, you will get access to everything he can use, meaning yes, even the dragon eggs. You can cast those dragon egg curses and spam your opponent with enormous red runes, which becomes especially powerful once you're in control. Because of course the computers in this game are programmed to not abuse certain things, which of course you will be able to. And well, Lapang can just cast perfect runes on command. So when you have a curse that spawns a giant dragon rune, and you have the ability to make any rune you cast perfect, yeah, that's going to be a lot of dragons flying towards your opponent. Yes, they have the super shield, but they can only super shield so much. I think Lapang is more balanced out, though, by the fact that at the end of the day, he is actually relatively curse dependent, even though he doesn't particularly seem like a very cursey character. Also, of course, by playing that teacher, there are now only 2 teachers to defeat, although one of them you will have a rematch with. Eventually, after playing the game a while longer, I'd gotten to the point where I had unlocked every character. Except one. We'll get back to that. And by this point, I'd made some progress with every character. I hadn't gotten every character to Hyperion, because a couple of them actually had certain choke points before Hyperion. For the most part, by the time I was at this skill level, I didn't really find much in the game to be too much of a challenge for me to beat, except Hyperion, but the few exceptions were actually the teacher battles in the Bronze Tower for some characters. Yeah, even though it was only the Bronze Tower, because you only get to learn 2 runes before your first teacher battle, and because you have no super shield for your first teacher battle, if the first 2 runes you learn for a certain character are either not very good, or not good without other runes in their kit that you don't have yet, sometimes you can be forced into a boss fight with a pretty capable opponent with basically no tools at your disposal if you pick the wrong character. There's even one example, in my opinion, of a character who actually has their hardest fight in the Silver Tower. Probably the only character in the game who I'd say that for, but Djinn. Despite the fact that Djinn is typically one of the easier characters in the game to play, I think his Bronze and Silver Tower fights are both really rough compared to every other battle he has to do, even Hyperion, because at those points in the game, he really isn't well equipped to deal with that stuff. By the end of the game, he's really a powerhouse though, and although he certainly doesn't make Hyperion easy, he definitely makes him easier than a lot of other characters. Still though, Strat was still the character I put the most time into, and so I was still sort of banking on that eventually I'd be able to beat him. Well, I guess I wasn't wrong. I've not kept exact dates, but to really put in perspective how difficult this fight was for me to beat the first time around, I believe the gap between me first reaching Hyperion and then actually managing to beat him for the first time. I remember the first time I beat him was with Strat, even though I consider Strat one of the slightly more difficult characters to beat him with. I obviously had just put in so much time into Strat that was the one I wanted to beat him with first. Well, I think if I remember correctly, it took 2 to 3 years Now, I don't want to scare you off too much, because I don't think that for most of you out there, if you started picking up this game and playing it now, it would take you quite that long. You got to remember that I was playing this game most when I was obviously a lot younger. But even still, that is absolutely not to play down just how difficult it is to finally get a win on this motherfucker. I know it's just words, so it's kind of hard to convey how insane it felt when I was there and I had actually done it personally myself. But I remember the first time I beat Hyperion just being absolutely paralyzed. My body was genuinely shaking and I was borderline hyperventilating. I was just staring at the screen and not tapping it. I almost felt scared to tap it. Of course, being a younger kid, I'd never really taken much care to pay attention to the story before now. But in that moment, I was thinking, I might never see this again. I still felt like, even though I'd just beaten Hyperion, like that was a fluke. Like, it could be another year or two before I ever beat him again. So when I was looking at this screen, even though it's just an image with some text and music, I was cherishing every moment of it, because I knew that I couldn't just see it again anytime I wanted to. Hyperion lies before you, defeated. Your eyes are drawn upwards in awe as you watch the heavens spiral, clouds twisting into swirls of light and magic. From all around you, as if coming from the air itself, you hear the tinkle of a childlike voice ringing in your ears.
Wish you was yours.
And then giggling.
Tell me what you wish for.
What happens after that depends on the character you pick. And I have to admit, again, I'm not saying this game's perfect. Most of the endings, they kind of suck a little bit. There's a few categories I put them into. Some are very predictable and kind of nothing endings. Some are kind of stupid and I think they're meant as a joke, but I genuinely don't know for some of them. But there is the occasional one that I actually find quite nice or sweet. Still, even the stupidest of ones, I have a weird way of valuing every single one, just knowing how hard it is to even see this screen. I suppose that is one of the few blessings of this game being so obscure, is that I think I value seeing these endings so much more, even if the ending isn't that great. Just knowing that I can't just see this screen whenever I want. Because the game is so obscure, as far as I've seen, I haven't seen anyone posting pictures of the endings or videos of them beating the game anywhere. So there would be no way for you to see how the story ends for any of these characters, except for you to actually go and beat Hyperion. One last nitpick I have to drop though is it absolutely sucks that when you beat the game with a character, you just see this star above them to say you beat the game with them, and if you try to select them, it just puts you back to the credits. I wish you could at least just refight Hyperion on demand, because I kind of forgot about this, and I'm not gonna lie, I beat the game with a few characters while, getting progression for this video, and I'm like, oh, wait, god damn it, that means I can't get more footage for those characters unless I start a new save file.
Well, boys, we did it. Racism is no more.
Speaking of which, that last character still isn't unlocked, is it?